Sagittarius, welcome back, my beautiful souls. I'm really happy to have you here. As always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Every reading seems to find the people it's meant to find in its own way. And before we get started, I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your energy, your kindness, and your presence. Whether you've been with this channel for a long time or you're just finding your way, here, I truly appreciate you. So, Sagittarius, let's settle in, take a look at these cards, and see what wants to come through for you today. Okay. The very first thing I'm noticing is that somebody is looking at you differently now. And honestly, Sagittarius, I don't think this happened overnight. I feel like this person has been watching, maybe quietly, maybe from a distance, maybe without even realizing how much attention they were actually paying to you. But something has changed. Because as I'm looking at these cards, the star immediately catches my attention, and the feeling I'm getting isn't about someone suddenly discovering you. No. It's more like somebody finally noticing what has been there all along. You know what's interesting? I don't feel like you've been chasing anything lately. I actually feel the opposite. I feel like many of you have been focusing on yourselves, working on your own goals, building your own future, taking care of your own energy. And somehow that has made this person stop and pay attention. Because there's something about your energy now that feels different. It feels calmer, more grounded, more confident, not louder, just stronger. And I keep hearing this person saying, wow, they've really changed. But I don't think they're talking about your appearance. I think they're talking about your presence. Because Sagittarius, there's this beautiful feeling here that you've grown into yourself. You don't seem to need constant validation anymore. You don't seem to be waiting for someone else's approval. You're moving forward because that's simply who you are. And honestly, that's inspiring this person more than they would ever admit. The Queen of Wands is sitting here. And the moment she appeared, I felt this warmth, this confidence, this natural magnetism. It's not the kind of energy that walks into a room demanding attention. It's the kind that receives attention without asking for it. And I feel like that's exactly what this person has been noticing. They're looking at the way you carry yourself, the way you recover from setbacks, the way you keep moving forward even after disappointments. And I don't know why this is coming through so strongly, but I feel like this person expected you to stay the same. Maybe they thought you'd always be available. Maybe they assumed your feelings would never change. Maybe they thought there would always be another opportunity. But now they're realizing something. You're not standing still. Your life is moving. You're evolving. And every time they look at you now, they seem to discover another layer they hadn't noticed before. Okay, this is interesting. Because as I'm looking at strength, I feel like this person admires something very specific about you. They admire your resilience. Not because life has been easy for you, but because you've continued anyway. And I keep seeing someone remembering moments when you could have become bitter, moments when you could have given up, moments when you could have chosen anger, but somehow you kept your heart open. You kept believing in yourself. You kept moving forward. And I think that affected this person more than they realized. Because while you're focused on becoming the best version of yourself, they were quietly learning from you. Whether they intended to or not, whether they admitted it or not, you became an example. And I know that's a strange thing to hear, but that's exactly what this feels like. It's almost as if your growth gave them permission to grow too. Your courage challenged them to look at their own fears. Your freedom challenged them to look at their own limitations. And now they're sitting with that realization. The Ace of Pentacles is showing up here, and I keep getting this feeling that they're starting to see value where they once saw familiarity. And there's a difference. Because sometimes people take for granted what is constantly available. Sometimes they overlook the very thing that has the most substance, the very thing that has the most potential. And I feel like that's what this person is beginning to understand. They're looking back at your connection. They're looking back at conversations, memories, moments they may have brushed aside, and now they're seeing them through completely different eyes. It's almost like they're realizing that what they thought was ordinary was actually rare. What they thought would always be there suddenly feels precious. And Sagittarius, I don't think this realization is coming from pressure. I don't think it's coming from guilt. I think it's coming from perspective, because distance has a way of revealing things. Growth has a way of revealing things. Time has a way of revealing things. And right now, somebody seems to be seeing you through a lens they never used before. And the more they look, the more they realize there was always something special here. The more they realize that your value was never determined by how much attention you received. It was always there, quietly, steadily, waiting to be recognized. And honestly, I feel like they're just beginning to understand that now. And the moment I say that, Sagittarius, I see the hermit sitting here, and this energy feels quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. You know the kind of silence that happens when somebody can no longer distract themselves? That's what this feels like. Because I don't think this person is running around looking for answers anymore. I actually feel like they're sitting alone with questions. Questions they spent a very long time avoiding. Questions they thought would eventually disappear if they stayed busy enough. But they didn't. If anything, those questions seem louder now. And I keep getting this image of somebody replaying old memories. Not because they want to. Not because they're trying to be nostalgic. It's almost happening automatically. Certain conversations come back. Certain moments come back. Things they didn't think were important at the time suddenly carry a completely different weight. And honestly, I feel like that's uncomfortable for them. Because the deeper they look, the more they realize there were moments when they knew exactly how you felt. There were moments when they saw your sincerity. Moments when they understood your intentions. And yet, for whatever reason, they couldn't fully meet you there. The Five of Pentacles is sitting here now. And what strikes me is how personal this feels. Because I don't necessarily feel that they're focused on what they lost physically. I think they're focused on what they failed to appreciate emotionally. There's a difference. It's one thing to miss somebody. It's another thing entirely to realize you may have taken their presence for granted. And I feel like this realization keeps showing up in waves. One minute they're okay, the next minute something reminds them of you, a song, a place, a random conversation, a familiar scent. Something completely ordinary suddenly becomes connected to you, and I don't think they expected that. I think part of them believed that enough time would create emotional distance. But what I'm actually seeing is that distance has been creating emotional clarity. Okay, that's interesting, because judgment just keeps pulling my attention back. And every time I look at it, I hear the same phrase. I understand now. Not I know everything, not I have all the answers. Just, I understand now. And sometimes that's the hardest realization of all. Because understanding arrives after the opportunity to do things differently has already passed. At least that's how it feels to them. They're looking at choices, looking at crossroads, looking at situations where they could have opened up, where they could have been honest, where they could have said what was really in their heart. And instead, they hesitated, or they avoided, or they convinced themselves they had more time. You know, I think this person spent a very long time trying to intellectualize their emotions, trying to explain them away, trying to find practical reasons why they shouldn't feel what they were feeling. But emotions don't really work like that. And now I'm seeing someone who can't quite escape them anymore, because every road seems to lead back to the same place. Every thought eventually circles back to the same person. Every question somehow has your name attached to it. And that's creating this huge shift inside them. The King of Cups is here now. And wow, the energy changes immediately, because beneath all of the confusion, beneath all of the analysis, beneath all of the hesitation, there are feelings here, deep feelings, feelings that seem much older than they're willing to admit. And I don't know who this is for, but I feel like this person rarely talks about what's happening inside of them. They're the type that keeps things contained, the type that processes everything privately, the type that appears fine even when they're carrying an entire storm behind their eyes. But lately, it's becoming harder to maintain that image because emotions have a way of surfacing when they've been ignored for too long. And I think that's exactly what's happening. This person is starting to acknowledge things they once pushed aside. They're acknowledging how much your support meant, how much your encouragement meant, how much your presence contributed to their life. And honestly, I think one of the most difficult realizations they're facing right now is understanding that you gave them things they never properly thanked you for. Not material things, not tangible things. I'm talking about belief, faith, patience, understanding. The kind of gifts people don't always recognize until they're gone. And as this awareness grows, so does the regret. Not dramatic regret, not theatrical regret, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up when nobody else is around, the kind that appears during long drives, sleepless nights, unexpected moments of reflection. Because I keep feeling this person asking themselves, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I try harder? Why was I so afraid? And what's fascinating is that I don't feel they're blaming you for anything anymore. I actually feel like they're looking inward, they're examining themselves, their choices, their fears, their emotional habits. And that's a very different energy from what I'm seeing here before. Something about this period of reflection is forcing them to be honest, really honest, maybe for the first time in a very long time. And Sagittarius, the more honest they become with themselves, the harder it becomes to ignore what they've been carrying in their heart all along. Because this isn't feeling like somebody discovering new emotions. This feels like somebody finally admitting emotions that have been there for much longer than they wanted to believe. And I can feel it building, slowly, quietly. Like a realization that's been approaching for a very long time and is finally close enough to touch. And that's where the energy starts to shift, Sagittarius. Because for a while, this person seemed comfortable living inside their own thoughts. Not happy there, not at peace there, but familiar. And sometimes people stay in familiar places far longer than they should simply because they're afraid of what happens when they finally step outside of them. But something feels different now. Something feels restless, like sitting still is no longer working. Like overthinking is no longer providing answers. Like all the analysis in the world can't replace a real conversation. And the moment I look down, the Knight of Wands is staring right back at me. Okay, there's movement here. Not reckless movement. Not impulsive movement. Just someone becoming increasingly aware that they can't remain frozen forever. Because I keep hearing this person say, I need to do something. Not because they're being forced. Not because they're running out of time. But because their own heart is becoming harder to ignore. And honestly, I think that's surprising them, because this feels like someone who once believed they could simply move on, someone who thought distance would solve everything, someone who convinced themselves that silence was easier than vulnerability. But now I feel this growing urge to bridge the gap, to reach across whatever space exists between the two of you, to stop wondering and start experiencing. You know, I keep seeing this person imagining moments, not huge dramatic moments, simple ones. Driving somewhere together, laughing over something stupid, sharing a meal, walking side by side. The kind of memories people don't usually fantasize about unless they genuinely miss someone's presence. And that's what stands out to me. They don't seem focused on fantasy anymore. They're focused on reality. They're focused on what it would actually feel like to have you near them. The Six of Cups appears here, and immediately I feel warmth, not sadness, warmth. Like somebody holding a memory in their hands and seeing it differently now. I think this person has been revisiting moments they once overlooked, moments that seemed ordinary at the time, but now they carry significance. A conversation, a smile, a look, a gesture. Something you said years ago that suddenly makes sense today. And it's almost like every memory is pointing them in the same direction. Not forcing them, not demanding anything. Just gently reminding them that what they felt was real, what they shared was real. What existed between the two of you mattered. And the more they sit with that realization, the more they begin to understand that feelings alone aren't enough. Because I'm hearing something very clearly. I'm tired of just thinking about it. Wow, that's strong. Because this person has spent so much time inside their own head that action almost feels unfamiliar now. But action keeps showing up. Action keeps knocking at the door. Action keeps interrupting their comfort zone. And honestly, I think they're beginning to understand that some risks are worth taking. The Three of Pentacles is here. And I keep getting this image of someone wanting to build something instead of merely imagining it. That's the difference. They're no longer asking themselves, what if? They're beginning to ask, what could happen if I actually tried? And Sagittarius, I don't know why this is coming through so clearly, but I feel like your energy has influenced this shift, because you've never really been someone who waits forever. You keep growing, you keep exploring, you keep moving forward. And I think this person has started to realize that life doesn't pause while people make up their minds. Life keeps happening. People keep evolving. Opportunities keep changing shape. And suddenly they're becoming very aware of that. They're becoming aware that if they want to be part of your future, they may need to participate in it. Not someday, not eventually, but genuinely. The Knight of Wands keeps pulling my attention back, and I have to laugh because the energy feels almost impatient. Like somebody waking up from a long sleep. Like somebody realizing they've spent too much time standing on the edge of something meaningful. And now they're feeling this urge to step forward, to see what happens, to stop watching life through a window and start walking into it. Okay, this is interesting, because Four of Wands is appearing and the atmosphere changes again. Everything feels softer, more personal, more intentional. And suddenly I'm seeing someone imagining a future that includes you. Not necessarily a grand plan, not every detail mapped out, but moments. Experiences, celebrations, adventures, the feeling of having someone beside them. I keep getting images of shared spaces, road trips, weekend plans. A dinner that lasts longer than expected because neither person wants to leave. A quiet morning with nowhere important to be. Simple things, real things. And what's beautiful is that this person doesn't seem to be chasing perfection anymore. They're chasing connection. They're chasing presence. They're chasing authenticity. Because somewhere along the way, they started realizing that what they wanted wasn't excitement without depth. It wasn't freedom without meaning. It wasn't attention without intimacy. What they wanted was something they could actually build, something they could actually experience, something they could actually share. And for the first time in a long time, I feel them stepping toward that possibility rather than away from it. I feel them becoming curious instead of fearful, open instead of guarded, willing instead of resistant. And that shift alone feels bigger than they fully understand right now. Because every time they picture the future, every time they imagine where their path could lead, your energy keeps finding its way into the picture. And maybe that's exactly why this feels so significant, Sagittarius. Because what I'm seeing now isn't just somebody making a decision. It's somebody becoming a different version of themselves while they're making it. And honestly, those are two very different things. Because people can decide to do something and still remain exactly who they've always been. But this energy? No. This feels deeper. This feels like the foundation underneath them is changing. The beliefs, the fears, the stories they've been telling themselves for years. It's all being questioned now. And the moment I look down, death appears. Okay, that's powerful. Because immediately I get this image of someone standing at the edge of an old chapter, not knowing exactly what comes next, but knowing they can't keep living inside the chapter that's ending. And I think that's been one of the hardest parts for this person. Not figuring out what they want. I think they're becoming increasingly aware of that. The difficult part has been letting go of the version of themselves that kept preventing them from reaching for it. You know, sometimes people become so attached to their fears that the fears start feeling like part of their identity. They don't even realize it anymore. It becomes normal. It becomes familiar. It becomes the voice that says, don't risk it. Don't trust it. Don't open up. Don't be vulnerable. And for a long time, I think this person listened to that voice. I think they believed it was protecting them. But now they're starting to wonder whether it was actually limiting them. And wow, the devil is sitting right beside death. That's interesting, because the energy here feels like recognition, not judgment. Recognition, like somebody suddenly seeing chains they didn't know they were carrying. Patterns they didn't know they were repeating. Excuses they didn't know they were hiding behind. And I keep hearing this person say, I don't want to keep doing this anymore. Not talking about you, talking about themselves, talking about old habits, old reactions, old ways of handling emotions. Because the truth is, I think this person became very comfortable staying in control, or at least appearing to be in control. But real connection doesn't work that way. Real connection asks people to be seen, to be known, to take emotional risks. And that's exactly where this person used to freeze. But something is happening. Something is cracking open. Because every time they try to return to the old way of thinking, it doesn't fit anymore. Every time they try to convince themselves that none of this matters, their heart disagrees. Every time they try to pretend they don't care, something inside them pushes back. And honestly, that internal conflict has become impossible to ignore. The chariot appears, and immediately the atmosphere changes. There's movement again. But this movement feels different from before. Before, it felt like desire. Now it feels like determination, and that's a huge difference because desire can come and go. Determination stays. I keep seeing somebody who has spent a very long time pulled in opposite directions. Part of them wanting connection, part of them wanting safety, part of them wanting love, part of them wanting control. And for years, those forces seem to have been fighting each other. But now I'm seeing alignment, not perfection, alignment. Like these different pieces are finally starting to move in the same direction. And Sagittarius, that's creating momentum. The kind of momentum that changes lives. The kind of momentum that appears after somebody stops running from themselves. Because that's what this feels like. It feels less about running towards you and more about finally stopping the endless cycle of running away from their own truth. Okay, justice just appeared and wow, everything suddenly feels very clear, very honest, very direct. Because I don't think this person is interested in pretending anymore. I don't think they're interested in shortcuts anymore. I think they're becoming increasingly aware that every choice creates consequences. Every silence creates consequences. Every action creates consequences. And lately they've been reflecting on that a lot. Not from a place of punishment, not from a place of guilt, but from a place of maturity. Because growth has a strange way of changing our perspective. Things that once seemed unimportant suddenly matter. Things we once ignored suddenly become obvious. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. This person is beginning to understand the impact of their choices, the impact of their absence, the impact of the things they never said. And what's beautiful is that instead of turning away from that realization, they're turning toward it. They're looking directly at it. And that's not easy. I mean, A lot of people spend their entire lives avoiding self-awareness, avoiding accountability, avoiding uncomfortable truths. But this person seems to be entering a phase where honesty feels more important than comfort. And honestly, that's where real transformation begins. Because I keep seeing old walls collapsing. Not dramatically, quietly. One realization at a time. One moment of clarity at a time. One truth at a time. And every piece that falls away reveals something underneath it. Something more authentic. Something more vulnerable. Something more real. The person who once needed distance is starting to question it. The person who once needed certainty is starting to accept uncertainty. The person who once feared emotional exposure is beginning to understand that vulnerability might not be weakness after all. And that's changing everything. Because when I look at all of these cards together, death, the devil, the chariot, justice, I don't see somebody losing themselves. I see somebody finding themselves, maybe for the first time in a very long time. And the more they discover who they actually are beneath all the fear, the more obvious certain truths become. Truths that have been waiting patiently beneath the surface. Truths that are becoming harder and harder to deny. And maybe that's why everything feels different now. Because once somebody starts seeing themselves clearly, they also start seeing their future differently. And that's exactly where my attention goes, the moment Four of Wands appears. The atmosphere softens again, not in a romantic movie kind of way, not in a fantasy kind of way. It feels real, grounded, intentional. Like somebody who's no longer asking themselves whether connection matters. They're starting to ask what kind of connection they're actually capable of building. And honestly, that's a much more mature question, because I keep seeing this person sitting with thoughts that feel surprisingly practical, not just emotional, not just passionate, practical. Questions like, what would life actually look like? What would it feel like to have this person beside me? What would happen if I stopped treating this like a possibility and started treating it like something worth investing in? And Sagittarius, that's a very different energy than what I was seeing before. Because for a long time, this person seemed focused on feelings. They seem focused on direction. The Four of Wands keeps drawing me into these images of shared experiences. Not necessarily huge milestones, just moments that carry meaning. A celebration, a gathering, a familiar face waiting for them at the end of a long day. A future memory that hasn't happened yet, but somehow already feels important. And I think that's what surprises them. Because this person may have spent years defining freedom one way. Freedom meant independence. Freedom meant keeping options open. Freedom meant not being tied down. But lately, their definition seems to be changing. Because they're beginning to realize that sharing a life with somebody doesn't automatically take freedom away. Sometimes it gives life more meaning. And wow, the Emperor just showed up, okay? This changes the energy immediately. Because suddenly I feel responsibility, not pressure. Responsibility. Like somebody looking at their own life and asking, what am I actually building? You know, I think this person used to believe that confidence meant never needing anyone. But now they're beginning to understand that confidence can also look like commitment. Confidence can look like showing up. Confidence can look like consistency. And that's what keeps coming through here. Consistency. Not excitement for one day. Not passion for one moment. Consistency. The willingness to keep choosing something. To keep investing in something. To keep nurturing something. And honestly, I don't think they expected to arrive at this realization. But it's happening anyway. Because every time I look at the Emperor, I see somebody becoming more intentional about their future. More intentional about who they allow into their life. More intentional about where their energy goes. And more intentional about who they want standing beside them while they build that future. The Ace of Pentacles is here too. And what I love about this energy is that it feels tangible. Not imaginary, not wishful. Tangible. Like somebody beginning to understand that meaningful connections require effort, attention, presence, time. And I think that's exactly what this person is contemplating. They're looking at possibilities through a completely different lens now. Instead of asking, what can I get from this? They're asking, what can I contribute to this? That's growth, real growth, because there's a shift from consumption to creation, from taking to building, from reacting to intentionally choosing. And I keep hearing this person think about stability. Not because stability is exciting, but because stability suddenly feels valuable. You know, there's something very Sagittarius about this energy too, because Sagittarius is often associated with expansion, growth, exploration, the search for something meaningful. And I feel like this person is beginning to understand that the next adventure isn't necessarily somewhere far away. Sometimes the next adventure is emotional. Sometimes the next adventure is allowing yourself to be fully present with another human being. And that realization feels profound. Justice appears again. And every time it does, the energy becomes crystal clear. I keep feeling this awareness that relationships aren't built on feelings alone. They're built on choices, daily choices, small choices, consistent choices. And I think this person is finally beginning to appreciate that. Because they're reflecting on balance, reciprocity, mutual effort. They're reflecting on what it means to actually show up for someone. And I don't know why this is coming through so strongly, but I feel like they're becoming very aware of the difference between wanting something and being ready for it. Those are not always the same thing. And maybe that's part of what this entire journey has been teaching them. Because what I'm seeing isn't somebody rushing toward an outcome. It's somebody slowly becoming the kind of person who can sustain the outcome they want. There's wisdom in that. There's maturity in that. And honestly, there's something beautiful about watching it unfold. Because every card here seems to point toward the same realization. Not that life needs to be perfect. Not that every answer needs to be known. But that some connections deserve to be treated with care. Some people deserve consistency. Some opportunities deserve courage. And as this person continues looking ahead, looking beyond old fears, looking beyond old limitations, I keep seeing them imagining a future that feels more stable than anything they've allowed themselves to imagine before. Not because they're escaping reality, but because for the first time, reality itself seems to be expanding into something larger than they once believed possible. Okay, Sagittarius, that's what I'm seeing right now. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your beautiful energy, and thank you for allowing me to read for you. Remember, this journey is yours. These cards may offer a glimpse into the energy surrounding you, but your path will always belong to you. Keep your heart open. Keep believing in your own growth, and keep moving forward the way only Sagittarius can, with courage, curiosity, and a little bit of faith in what life is still trying to show you. If this reading resonated, I'd love to have you back here again. Don't forget to subscribe and join our little tarot family. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and keep shining your light. I'll see you in the next one.